In December of 1942, in the icy hills around Stalingrad, a single shot echoed through the deadly silence of the Russian winter. 900 meters away, a German officer instantly collapsed. His death was so precise that nearby soldiers took several seconds to understand what had happened. The sniper responsible for this extraordinary feat was not a seasoned veteran with decades of training. Instead, he was a 19-year-old Siberian peasant named Dmitri Volkov. He was armed only with a standard Mosin-Nagant PU rifle, and something the Red Army considered impossible: a secret method to completely master the wind. What made this shot even more impressive was that Volkov had developed his revolutionary technique not through official military manuals or advanced training, but through an accidental discovery. This discovery would challenge everything ballistic experts thought they knew about precision in extreme conditions. While Soviet commanders celebrated their most famous elite snipers, they remained completely unaware that one of their youngest soldiers had decoded the greatest obstacle faced by marksmen worldwide: precise wind compensation at extreme distances. This is the story of how an innovation, born from desperate necessity and meticulous observation, transformed a common weapon into a lethal precision tool. It revealed a truth about precision warfare that remained hidden for decades. The Mosin-Nagant Model 9130, with a PU telescopic sight, represented the absolute standard of Soviet precision weaponry during World War II. Weighing 9.6 pounds and measuring 48.5 inches in length, this bolt-action rifle used the 7.62 by 54 mm R cartridge. It was capable of maintaining lethal accuracy up to 800 meters under ideal conditions. The PU telescopic sight, with 3.5 power magnification and a 6-degree field of view, offered sufficient clarity for precise target identification at long distances. However, military manuals could not teach how to adequately compensate for wind variations. These variations transformed accurate shots into fatal errors. Dmitri Volkov had been assigned to the 62nd Rifle Division as an elite sniper after demonstrating exceptional skill in basic training. Born in a small Siberian village where hunting was a matter of survival, Volkov possessed an intuitive understanding of ballistics that impressed his instructors. However, when he arrived at the Stalingrad front in November of 1942, he quickly discovered that his hunting skills in calm forests did not automatically translate to the chaotic and windy environment of urban ruins. His first engagements resulted in constant frustrations. Projectiles that should have hit the center of the target consistently drifted left or right, allowing valuable targets to escape and putting his position at risk of counterattack. The difference between theory and battlefield reality was about to force an innovation that would change everything. Volkov's first weeks in combat revealed the same problem that plagued elite snipers in all armies: the impossibility of accurately predicting the effects of wind on projectiles in flight. Soviet manuals provided basic compensation tables, but these were inadequate for the complex and variable conditions found in Stalingrad. Crosswinds, sudden gusts, and air currents created by the ruins of buildings made every shot a risky gamble. Volkov's frustration peaked on December 15th, when he had the perfect opportunity to eliminate a German commander coordinating an attack against Soviet positions. The target was approximately 750 meters away, perfectly visible through his PU sight. However, a moderate side wind made the engagement extremely challenging. Volkov calculated the compensation using traditional methods, adjusted his sight, and fired. The projectile passed just 2 feet from the target, alerting the entire German unit to his presence and forcing him into a hasty retreat under heavy fire. That night, while sheltering in a bombed-out basement, Volkov made a decision that would change not only his effectiveness as a sniper, but potentially the course of countless future engagements. He would begin to meticulously document every shot, every wind condition, and every result. He sought patterns that military manuals had missed. What he did not know was that he was about to discover something revolutionary. The methodology Volkov developed was born from a seemingly simple, yet deeply revealing observation. On December 18th, he noticed how small fragments of paper and debris moved differently at various altitudes within the ruins of Stalingrad. While the wind at ground level consistently blew from the west, at 15 to 20 feet high, Completely different air currents were created by the destruction patterns of the buildings. This observation led him to a crucial insight: the trajectory of a rifle projectile, which reaches heights of up to 12 feet in an 800-meter shot, crosses multiple layers of wind with potentially different speeds and directions. Traditional compensation methods erroneously assumed that the wind was uniform along the entire projectile trajectory. Volkov began carrying small pieces of cloth and paper in his gear, releasing them at different altitudes before each engagement to map the air currents. More importantly, he began keeping a detailed record in a small improvised notebook. He noted not only the wind speed and direction, but also the temperature, humidity, time of day, and even the direction of sunlight. Each entry included the target distance, the actual impact point versus the intended aiming point, and the specific conditions of the moment. After 2 weeks of obsessive documentation, patterns began to emerge that completely contradicted official precision shooting guidelines. Volkov was discovering that wind was not just a variable to be compensated for, but a complex system that could be decoded and predicted. The moment of discovery arrived on January 2nd, 1943, when the temperature had dropped to -18 degrees Fahrenheit. Volkov was positioned in a partially destroyed building, observing a German position approximately 850 meters away. His notes from previous weeks had revealed an intriguing pattern. In extremely low temperatures, air density increased significantly. This affected not only projectile speed, but also how the wind interacted with it in flight. More crucially, he had noticed that wind gusts followed predictable temporal patterns, especially in the early morning hours when temperature differences created regular convection currents. Using his notes, Volkov identified that gusts tended to occur at 12 to 15-second intervals under these specific conditions, with periods of relative calm in between. When a German officer emerged from a trench to inspect the defenses, Volkov did not just calculate the compensation for the current wind. He timed his shot to coincide with the calm period predicted in his pattern. The result was devastating. The 7.62 by 54 mm R projectile hit the target with perfect accuracy at 847 meters, a distance that was beyond the capabilities normally attributed to the Mosin-Nagant PU. The success was not luck, but the result of a systematic understanding of conditions that no military manual had documented. Volkov had discovered that wind was not an obstacle to be overcome, but a code to be deciphered. Volkov's increasing effectiveness did not go unnoticed by his superiors, but for reasons he had not anticipated. Instead of recognizing his innovation, the Soviet command attributed his successes to the natural superiority of Soviet equipment and the superior training of the Red Army. This misguided interpretation created a paradoxical situation. While Volkov continued refining his revolutionary technique, official reports credited his achievements to standard military doctrine. The young sniper quickly realized that revealing his unconventional methods could result in negative consequences, especially in a military environment that valued conformity and distrusted individual innovations. Consequently, he kept his discoveries secret, sharing only fragments of information with other elite snipers in his unit. In January of 1943, Volkov privately developed what he called his wind card. This was a system of coded notes that allowed him to quickly consult the ideal conditions for extreme engagements. This card was not a single physical object, but a series of small notes distributed throughout his personal equipment, disguised as mundane reminders or supply lists. The system included symbols for different wind types, codes for specific temperatures, and even notations on how the sun's position affected visibility through the PU telescopic sight. More importantly, the card documented the temporal patterns he had discovered, allowing him to predict with remarkable accuracy when conditions would be ideal for extremely precise shots. This clandestine innovation was about to be tested on a much larger scale. The definitive test came in Operation Ring, the final Soviet offensive to eliminate the German pocket in Stalingrad. On January 15, 1943, his unit received orders to eliminate German artillery observers who were directing accurate fire against advanced Soviet positions. The targets were positioned in a partially destroyed water tower at an estimated distance of 920 meters, well beyond the effective range traditionally attributed to the Mosin-Nagant PU. Soviet commanders considered the mission almost impossible. However, Volkov had identified conditions that perfectly matched the patterns documented in his wind card. The temperature was -12 degrees Fahrenheit, with consistent winds from the northeast at 8 to 10 miles per hour. Most crucially, the gust patterns he had mapped indicated calm periods of 18 to 20 seconds every 2 minutes. Using standard 7.62 by 54 mm R ammunition, with a 148-grain projectile, Volkov calculated not only the traditional compensation for projectile drop and wind drift, but also adjusted for increased air density and the temporal pattern of the currents. At 2:23 p.m., he fired. The projectile traveled for 2.1 seconds before hitting the first German observer with lethal precision. 16 minutes later, he eliminated the second observer at an even greater distance. German artillery fire immediately ceased, allowing Soviet forces to advance without significant opposition. What made these shots truly extraordinary was not just the distance, but the consistency. Volkov had transformed what was considered luck into applied science. News of Volkov's extraordinary feats spread quickly through the Soviet ranks, but the interpretation of events varied dramatically depending on the perspective. Senior officers attributed the success to the technical superiority of Soviet equipment and the effectiveness of standard military training, using the achievements as propaganda to demonstrate the Red Army's supremacy. Veteran elite snipers, however, immediately recognized that something exceptional had occurred, especially considering the adverse conditions and the distances involved. Some began to discreetly observe Volkov's methods, noting his seemingly strange rituals of dropping small objects into the air and consulting notes before each engagement. Volkov himself faced a growing dilemma. His successes were attracting unwanted attention, but sharing his methods could result in unpredictable consequences. In a military system that distrusted unauthorized innovations, the solution he developed was characteristically ingenious. He began teaching elements of his technique to other snipers, but in a fragmented way, disguised as Siberian hunting tricks or personal observations about the weather. In February of 1943, at least 6 other snipers in his division began incorporating aspects of his approach, resulting in a measurable improvement in the unit's accuracy. Commanders noticed the improvement, but attributed it to conventional factors such as high morale and accumulated combat experience. The true revolution in precision shooting was quietly spreading through the Red Army, disguised as normal military progress. In March of 1943, as cleanup operations in Stalingrad were coming to an end, Volkov had the opportunity to test his approach under completely different conditions. His unit was transferred to the Kursk sector, where the open terrain and variable conditions presented unique challenges for precision shooting. The vast Ukrainian plains created completely different wind patterns than those found in the urban ruins of Stalingrad, forcing Volkov to adapt and expand his system. He discovered that in open terrain, winds tended to be more consistent, but also stronger, requiring greater compensation. More importantly, he observed that ground temperature significantly affected air currents near the surface, especially during transitions between day and night. This observation led him to an additional discovery. The time of day not only affected visibility, but also the predictability of wind patterns. In the early morning hours, when the ground was colder than the air, convection currents created turbulence that made extreme engagements difficult. However, in the late afternoon, when temperatures stabilized, 20 to 30-minute windows of opportunity emerged, with almost ideal conditions for precision shooting. Volkov meticulously documented these discoveries, expanding his wind card to include specific terrain variables and seasonal patterns. On March 18th, he managed to eliminate a German observer at an estimated distance of 1,050 meters. This was a feat that challenged not only the perceived limitations of the Mosin-Nagant PU, but also the basic laws of ballistics as understood at the time. Volkov's extraordinary success in Kursk attracted the attention of an unexpected source: ballistic experts from the Tula Military Research Institute. These experts had been sent to the front to assess the performance of Soviet equipment under real combat conditions. When reports of consistent engagements beyond 1,000 meters reached their offices, they initially dismissed the information as typical exaggerations from field reports. However, the consistency and specificity of the data forced a more detailed investigation. In April of 1943, a team of 3 ballistic engineers discreetly arrived at Volkov's position to observe his techniques firsthand. What they witnessed fundamentally challenged their theoretical understandings of precision shooting. Volkov not only demonstrated precise shots at extreme distances, but also explained how he predicted the ideal conditions for each attempt. The engineers were particularly impressed by his intuitive understanding of how multiple variables interacted to affect the projectile's trajectory. Dr. Alexei Petrov, the team leader, later wrote in his confidential report, "Soldier Volkov empirically developed an understanding of external ballistics that exceeds our current theoretical models. His observations on stratified wind patterns and temperature effects on air density represent significant advances in our scientific understanding." However, the report also contained a surprising recommendation that Volkov's methods be studied discreetly, but not officially implemented until they could be properly systematized and integrated into existing military doctrine. This bureaucratic decision ensured that one of the most significant innovations in precision shooting remained limited to a small circle of practitioners. While ballistic experts debated the official implementation of his discoveries, Volkov continued refining his approach through practical combat experience. In the summer of 1943, he developed what he considered the final version of his wind card. This was a coded system that allowed for rapid assessment of conditions and accurate prediction of opportunity windows for extreme engagements. The system had evolved far beyond its simple origins, now incorporating variables such as barometric pressure, estimated through observations of clouds and smoke behavior, relative humidity, determined through observations of condensation and evaporation, and even Coriolis effects for extremely long shots. More importantly, Volkov had discovered how to teach elements of his technique to other snipers without revealing the complete system. He developed a series of observation exercises that trained other soldiers to recognize patterns without necessarily understanding the underlying theory. In July of 1943, 12 snipers in his division were using aspects of Volkov's approach, resulting in a 340% improvement in the accuracy of engagements beyond 600 meters. Commanders noticed that his unit was consistently outperforming other divisions in high-priority target elimination missions, but continued to attribute the success to conventional factors. The irony of the situation was not lost on Volkov. He had developed an innovation that could revolutionize precision warfare, but the military system that benefited from his results was unable to officially recognize or implement his discoveries. This contradiction was about to have unforeseen consequences. In August of 1943, Volkov received a mission that would test not only his technical skills, but also the ethical limits of his innovation. Soviet intelligence had identified a German commander whose elimination could significantly disrupt enemy defenses in a crucial sector. The target was located in a fortified command post at an estimated distance of 1,200 meters, well beyond any documented engagement with the Mosin-Nagant PU. Even more challenging, the target would only be visible for 30 seconds when he emerged to inspect the defenses at 6:15 a.m. each morning. Volkov spent 3 days observing conditions at the site, documenting wind patterns, and identifying the ideal window of opportunity. His notes indicated that at 6:13 a.m. on August 12th, almost perfect conditions would converge. A stable temperature of 58 degrees Fahrenheit, a consistent wind of 6 miles per hour from the southeast, and most crucially, a calm period that would last approximately 45 seconds. On the designated morning, Volkov positioned himself exactly at 5:45 a.m., using his 28 minutes of preparation to confirm the predicted conditions and make final adjustments to his sight. At 6:13 and 30 seconds a.m., he fired. The projectile traveled for 2.8 seconds before hitting the target with lethal precision at a distance later confirmed to be 1,187 meters. The German command in the sector immediately collapsed, allowing Soviet forces to advance with minimal resistance. However, the success brought a disturbing realization for Volkov. His innovation had become a weapon of psychological warfare, creating a reputation for invincibility that affected enemy morale far beyond the direct tactical impact of his eliminations. The 1,187-meter engagement marked a turning point not only in Volkov's career, but in the German perception of Soviet precision shooting capabilities. German intelligence reports began documenting super snipers, capable of impossible eliminations at extreme distances, creating an atmosphere of paranoia among officers who previously considered themselves safe in well-protected positions. This unintentional psychological warfare had strategic consequences. German commanders began to severely limit their exposures, reducing their operational effectiveness and creating bottlenecks in the chain of command. Volkov observed these behavioral changes with scientific interest, documenting how the reputation for extreme precision affected enemy tactics even when he was not actively engaged. His notes from this period reveal a sophisticated understanding of how technological innovation and psychological warfare intersected in unforeseen ways. In September of 1943, he began experimenting with demonstration shots. These were deliberately visible eliminations intended to maximize psychological effect rather than direct tactical value. These engagements, executed at distances of 800 to 900 meters in high visibility conditions, created a legendary reputation that spread through German lines. Captured prisoners reported that German soldiers had begun to refer to Soviet snipers as wind ghosts, an unconscious reference to the methodology that made their shots possible. The irony was that while enemies attributed almost supernatural capabilities to Soviet snipers, the Soviet command itself remained ignorant of the scientific methods that made these feats possible. In October of 1943, as Soviet forces consistently advanced westward, Volkov faced a growing dilemma about the future of his innovation. His observations had revealed that other snipers were trying to replicate his methods through imitation, but without understanding the fundamental principles, their results were inconsistent and often dangerous. Miscalculated engagements not only failed to hit targets, but also revealed Soviet positions for German counterattacks. Volkov realized that his discovery had created a responsibility. He needed to find a way to systematically transmit his knowledge, but without violating military norms that prohibited unauthorized innovations. The solution he developed was characteristically ingenious. He began creating training exercises that taught the principles of his approach without explicitly revealing that it was a revolutionary technique. These exercises included pattern observation, timing of wind gusts, and correlation of environmental conditions with shooting accuracy. In November, he had informally trained 23 snipers in his division, creating a network of practitioners who began to achieve consistently superior results. Commanders noticed the improvement, but attributed it to accumulated combat experience and high morale. The truth was that Volkov had created the first unofficial school of advanced precision shooting in the Red Army, disguised as routine training. His students began to teach others, creating a viral spread of knowledge that spread through Soviet forces without official recognition. This clandestine network of knowledge was about to have a much greater impact than anyone had anticipated. In December of 1943, exactly 1 year after his first revolutionary engagement, Volkov received transfer orders to an elite sniper unit being formed for special operations. This transfer represented both an opportunity and a threat. While it would give him access to superior equipment and higher priority targets, it would also place him under more intense scrutiny from officers who might question his unconventional methods. In his last days with the 62nd Rifle Division, Volkov made a decision that would define the legacy of his innovation. He created a coded and simplified version of his wind card, disguised as an equipment checklist, that could be copied and distributed without arousing suspicion. This condensed version contained the essential elements of his approach: symbols for different wind conditions, codes for ideal temperatures, and disguised instructions for timing patterns. More importantly, It included a series of equipment maintenance exercises that were actually observation techniques. Volkov distributed copies of this list to 12 selected snipers, instructing them to share these maintenance techniques with other soldiers to improve equipment reliability. In January of 1944, when he left for his new unit, at least 40 snipers were using aspects of his approach, and the number continued to grow through informal transmission. What had begun as a personal discovery had become an underground movement of innovation that spread through the Red Army like a beneficial virus, quietly improving precision shooting effectiveness without official recognition. Volkov's new unit, officially designated as Special Reconnaissance Detachment 47, operated under very different guidelines from his previous experiences. Composed of 18 elite snipers selected from different divisions, the unit had access to superior equipment, including Mosin-Nagant PU rifles with enhanced telescopic sights and specially manufactured precision ammunition. More importantly, they operated with greater tactical autonomy, allowing Volkov to implement his approach without direct interference from commanders who did not understand his techniques. In February of 1944, he discovered that 3 other members of the unit had independently developed aspects of similar techniques. This confirmed his suspicion that the need for extreme precision shooting was forcing parallel innovations throughout the Red Army. This discovery led him to a crucial realization. His approach was not unique, but represented a natural evolution of precision shooting techniques that was occurring simultaneously in multiple units. What made his contribution special was not absolute originality, but the systematization and documentation of principles that others had intuitively discovered. In March of 1944, Volkov began to discreetly collaborate with these other innovators, creating a synthesis of techniques that represented the state-of-the-art in Soviet precision shooting. This collaboration resulted in additional refinements to his approach, including techniques for compensating for mirage effects, methods for estimating distances with greater accuracy, and strategies for precision shooting in low visibility conditions. The unit began to achieve results that impressed even experienced observers: consistent eliminations at distances of 900 to 1,100 meters, with an 89% success rate under favorable conditions. In April of 1944, as Soviet forces prepared for the summer offensive, Detachment 47 received its most ambitious mission: to eliminate a series of German artillery observers who were directing accurate fire against concentrations of Soviet troops. The targets were positioned in fortified observation towers at distances ranging from 1,000 to 1,300 meters. These distances challenged not only the capabilities of the Mosin-Nagant PU, but also the theoretical limits of precision shooting with bolt-action rifles. Volkov and his collaborators spent 1 week mapping the conditions in the area of operations, identifying wind patterns and determining the ideal opportunity windows for each target. Their observations revealed that the German towers had been positioned specifically to take advantage of air currents that made extreme engagements difficult. This indicated that the Germans understood the challenges of precision shooting better than the Soviets had assumed. This discovery forced an additional adaptation of Volkov's approach. He developed techniques to identify and exploit calm windows created by topographic obstacles that temporarily interrupted defensive wind patterns. On April 23rd, he managed to eliminate the first observer at a distance of 1,247 meters. Over the next 5 days, Detachment 47 systematically eliminated all 7 German observers, using a combination of advanced compensation techniques and precise timing. German artillery fire in the sector ceased completely, allowing Soviet forces to concentrate without interference. More importantly, the mission demonstrated that Volkov's approach had evolved beyond an individual technique to become an operational doctrine capable of affecting strategic outcomes. The extraordinary success of Detachment 47 finally attracted the official attention that Volkov had avoided for so long. In May of 1944, a military investigation commission arrived to officially document the techniques that were producing impossible results. The commission, led by Major General Ivan Kozlov, included ballistic experts, intelligence officers, and representatives from the general staff. For 2 intensive weeks, they meticulously observed and documented the operations of Detachment 47, focusing particularly on Volkov's methods. What they discovered fundamentally challenged their understandings of precision shooting and forced a re-evaluation of Soviet capabilities. The Commission's final report, classified as Special Secret, documented techniques that significantly exceeded official precision shooting guidelines. More importantly, the report recognized that these innovations had developed organically in the field, without official direction or support. General Kozlov wrote, "The observed techniques represent empirical advances in applied ballistics that exceed our current theoretical models. The systematic implementation of these approaches could revolutionize our precision shooting capability." However, the report also contained a controversial recommendation that the techniques be studied and refined before official implementation, a process that could take years. This bureaucratic decision ensured that Volkov's innovations remained limited to specialized units, rather than being widely implemented throughout the Red Army. The irony was that while senior officers debated the formalization of his discoveries, Volkov's approach continued to spread informally through the ranks, creating a silent revolution in precision shooting that operated completely outside official channels. In June of 1944, while military bureaucracies debated the official implementation of his techniques, Volkov faced a disturbing realization about the broader implications of his innovation. Intelligence reports indicated that German units had begun to develop specific countermeasures to neutralize extreme Soviet snipers. These included the use of smoke screens, tactical positioning to exploit air currents, and even attempts to replicate Soviet techniques through analysis of engagement patterns. This escalation represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of precision warfare. What had begun as an individual innovation was becoming a technological arms race between opposing approaches. Volkov realized that his discovery had created not only a tactical advantage, but also a strategic vulnerability. The more effective Soviet techniques became, the more enemy resources were dedicated to neutralizing them. In July, he began to develop countermeasures to countermeasures. These were techniques to overcome German defenses that had been specifically designed to thwart Soviet precision shooting. These included methods for engaging through smoke screens using sound references, techniques for exploiting visibility windows created by smoke movements, and strategies for coordinating multiple snipers to saturate pinpoint defenses. More importantly, he developed protocols to rapidly adapt to changing defensive approaches, ensuring that Soviet techniques remained effective even when facing sophisticated countermeasures. This continuous evolution transformed precision shooting from a static skill into a dynamic discipline that required constant innovation to maintain tactical advantage. In August of 1944, during the Soviet offensive in Romania, Volkov had the opportunity to test his countermeasures against the most sophisticated German defenses he had encountered. German units in the sector had implemented a multi-layered defensive system specifically designed to neutralize elite snipers. This included coordinated smoke screens, positioning observers in locations that exploited unfavorable air currents, and the use of German snipers as counter-snipers to eliminate Soviet threats. This environment represented the ultimate test not only of Volkov's techniques, but of his ability to adapt and innovate under extreme pressure. In the first week of operations, Detachment 47 faced consistent frustrations. Targets that should have been easily eliminated remained protected by defenses that seemed to anticipate and neutralize Soviet techniques. The situation forced Volkov into an additional innovation. He began using German countermeasures as reconnaissance tools, observing how smoke screens moved to map air currents and using the positioning of German observers to identify locations with favorable conditions. On August 15th, he managed to eliminate a German commander at 1,156 meters by firing through a smoke screen, using the smoke's movement to time a 3-second visibility window. This engagement demonstrated that Soviet techniques had evolved beyond their countermeasures, creating a new phase in the precision shooting arms race. Over the next 2 weeks, Detachment 47 systematically eliminated 23 high-priority targets, using techniques that transformed German defenses into exploitable vulnerabilities. The continued success of Volkov's techniques in the summer of 1944 created a paradoxical situation. The more effective his innovations became, the more they attracted attention that threatened their unofficial implementation. Senior commanders, impressed by Detachment 47's results, began to push for formal documentation and systematic implementation of the techniques. Simultaneously, ballistic experts continued to insist that scientifically untested methods should not be widely implemented without extensive theoretical validation. This tension between practical effectiveness and bureaucratic approval created an environment where Volkov's innovations existed in an official limbo, widely recognized as effective, but not officially endorsed or systematized. In September of 1944, Volkov made a decision that would define the final legacy of his discovery. He began secretly training instructors who could disseminate his techniques throughout the Red Army without official approval. These instructors, selected from experienced snipers who had demonstrated an intuitive understanding of the principles, received simplified versions of the approach disguised as traditional hunting techniques or observations on equipment maintenance. In October, 12 instructors had been trained and began teaching aspects of Volkov's techniques in their home units. This decentralized dissemination system ensured that innovations continued to spread independently of bureaucratic approval, creating a network of knowledge that operated parallel to official channels. In November of 1944, internal estimates indicated that more than 200 Soviet snipers were using aspects of Volkov's approach, resulting in a measurable improvement in precision shooting effectiveness on multiple fronts. In December of 1944, as Soviet forces approached the German borders, Volkov received a mission that would test not only his technical skills, but also his ability to train others under extreme pressure. A newly formed elite sniper unit, composed of soldiers with limited experience in extreme engagements, needed to be quickly prepared for operations in German territory. Volkov had only 2 weeks to transmit the essential elements of his approach to 15 snipers who had never attempted shots beyond 600 meters. The challenge forced him to distill his complex technique into fundamental principles that could be learned and applied quickly. He developed an intensive training program that focused on the most critical aspects of his approach: pattern recognition, timing of ideal conditions, and basic compensation for multiple environmental variables. More importantly, he created practical exercises that allowed new snipers to develop intuition through direct experience, rather than memorizing tables and formulas. In January of 1945, this newly trained unit achieved results that surprised experienced observers. Consistent eliminations at distances of 800 to 1,000 meters, with a success rate that exceeded veteran units using traditional methods. The success demonstrated that Volkov's approach had evolved beyond a personal technique to become a reproducible training system that could be effectively transmitted to other soldiers. This discovery had profound implications. If the techniques could be taught quickly and implemented widely, they represented not only a tactical innovation, but a potential transformation in Soviet military doctrine. In February of 1945, as Soviet forces advanced through eastern Germany, Volkov faced the final test of his approach: operations in densely populated urban territory, where precision shooting required not only technical skill, but also absolute moral precision. The ruins of German cities created extremely complex conditions, with unpredictable air currents caused by destroyed buildings and continuous fires. Even more challenging, the presence of civilians required that each engagement be executed with perfect precision to avoid non-combatant casualties. In the battle for Breslau, Volkov developed additional refinements to his technique specifically for urban environments. These included methods for using smoke from fires as indicators of air currents, techniques for compensating for turbulence created by destroyed structures, and strategies for identifying engagement windows that minimized risks to civilians. On February 18th, he managed to eliminate a German sniper who was causing significant casualties among Soviet troops. He fired through a window just 8 inches wide at a distance of 743 meters, with civilians visible less than 20 feet from the target. This engagement demonstrated that his approach had evolved to include not only technical precision, but also moral responsibility. This dimension transformed precision shooting from a purely military skill into a discipline that required sophisticated ethical judgment. In March of 1945, as urban operations continued, Volkov trained other snipers in these refined techniques, creating a new generation of specialists capable of operating effectively in environments where technical precision and moral responsibility were equally critical. In April of 1945, in the final weeks of the war in Europe, Volkov received an unexpected visit that would reveal the true extent of his innovation. Dr. Alexei Petrov, the ballistic expert who had investigated his techniques in 1943, arrived with a team of researchers to officially document the evolution of Volkov's approach. What they discovered exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The techniques had spread through at least 40 Soviet divisions, creating a measurable improvement in precision shooting effectiveness that had contributed significantly to the success of the final operations. Dr. Petrov revealed that statistical analyses indicated a 280% improvement in the accuracy of extreme engagements among units that had adopted aspects of Volkov's approach compared with units using traditional techniques. More importantly, he informed Volkov that his innovations were being studied for official implementation in the post-war period, with plans to incorporate the principles into training manuals and formal instruction programs. This revelation created mixed feelings for Volkov, satisfaction that his discoveries would be preserved and systematized, but also apprehension about how formalization might affect the adaptive and evolutionary nature of his techniques. In his conversations with Dr. Petrov, he emphasized that the most important aspect of his approach was not the specific techniques, but the mindset of continuous observation and adaptation that had made the innovation possible. He argued that any official implementation should preserve this flexibility, avoiding the rigidity that could transform a dynamic discovery into a static doctrine. This perspective would profoundly influence how his contributions would be integrated into post-war Soviet military doctrine. On May 8, 1945, when the war in Europe officially ended, Volkov reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a frustrated engagement in December of 1942. His personal innovation had evolved to become a silent revolution in precision shooting that affected thousands of soldiers in countless military operations. More importantly, it had demonstrated how meticulous observation, systematic experimentation, and continuous adaptation could overcome seemingly insurmountable technological and doctrinal limitations. In June of 1945, as he prepared to return to civilian life, Volkov completed the final version of his documentation, a comprehensive manual that preserved not only the specific techniques he had developed, but also the approach of observation and experimentation that had made the discovery possible. This document, later known as the Observation Manual for Precision Shooting, would become the basis for Soviet elite sniper training programs in the following decades. The manual emphasized that extreme precision shooting was not a matter of superior equipment or supernatural ability, but of scientific understanding of conditions and systematic application of observable principles. Volkov included detailed instructions for developing intuition, techniques for documenting and analyzing wind patterns, and most importantly, guidelines for continuously adapting approaches as new conditions and challenges emerged. His final contribution was a series of training exercises that allowed any soldier to develop the observation skills necessary for advanced precision shooting, democratizing knowledge that had previously been limited to exceptional individuals. Dmitri Volkov's legacy was not just a revolutionary technique, but a demonstration of how scientific curiosity, individual perseverance, and practical innovation could fundamentally transform military capabilities, proving that the most significant discoveries often emerge not from laboratories or academies, but from desperate necessity and meticulous observation on the battlefield.